Rome always smelled faintly of ash in the rain, and that spring, as I stood at the front of the church municipal hall, my hands cold and balled in the pockets of my cheap thrifted jeans, that city smell was all I could breathe. Raindrops ticked against high windows. Standing benches and scratched wooden chairs had filled with neighbors and uncles, so many familiar faces that none looked directly at me. Padre Giovanni gestured for me to step forward. My mother's shawl wrapped her as if to make her vanish. My father's lips pressed thin. Even his gray hair, trimmed brusquely before Mass, seemed to bristle. Nonna crossed herself, eyes squeezed shut. "Luca Filippo Grandi," Padre began. "Your family, your friends, they hope to help you see reason." The room was silent, like pressurized marble. Someone coughed. "That's why we're all here," he intoned. "You may speak." Of course I'd speak. I'd rehearsed this defense so many times that my tongue could hardly keep up anymore. I loosened my jaw, looked past the banners with faded St. Peter's crossed keys. Faces I'd known since childhood clustered in disapproval. Even my cousin Giuseppe, whose hands shook with nerves for my sake, would not meet my gaze. "I want to be a journalist," I said again. "Not for gossip, not for fame. I want to find the truth behind what's wrong. I want to uncover lies and ... My words collapsed in my mouth. "I want to write, make things better." A ripple, just the sound of someone shifting on vinyl. Vittoria from across the street couldn't stifle a laugh. My uncle's scoff scratched the air. The rest waited for permission to join in. Nonna grew louder than all of them. "Does Rome truly need another scribbler? Your grandfather bricked these walls. Is this worth shaming your family?" Padre held up a placating hand, but didn't take his eyes off me. My father sighed so deeply, I felt the air drag me with it. "We sent you to school," my mother pleaded, "not for these crazy ambitions." Rosalia, my little sister, hid behind her mother's jacket. Only her eyes watched, the rest of her unwilling to be seen beside me. "Who'll pay you for stories, eh?" Uncle Beppe demanded. "This isn't America. We work. You are dreaming." Around him, the laughter took root, good-natured to some, but in my ears, each voice became an indictment. I was told to try teaching or secretarial work, or to join my father's brick-cutting business. When the list of better options ended, I was asked if I thought I was special. No one said it, but I heard. "Are you better than us? Too good for the scaffolding, for the pasta factories, for the lumber yard?" Each accusation pressed into my back, one after another. The anger within me burned bright, white-hot. My pulse pounded at my temples. I wanted to scream at them for their smallness, for their fear. How could they not want more? But my voice came out cold. "I'm not better than anyone," I managed. "I just need to do this. I can't explain it." Padre Giovanni sighed, as if disappointed by the entire process. "We pray you will come to your senses, perhaps some time away, out in the real world." More laughter. My cheeks burned. I forced myself to stand up straight, even as my own knees seemed to ache beneath the shame. I scanned the hall once more, memorizing the faces, breathing the old wood, the storm outside. In that moment, I promised myself two things. I would not forget how this felt, and someday I would make them see I was right. The next years were an ocean of rejection. Everyone in Rome had a cousin in communications, and none of them answered my calls. I worked the night shift in a bakery, rolling dough long after the last train stilled, picking newsprint from dustbins behind the newsstand for practice. I sent letters to editors, sometimes scribbled by hand when the internet cafe was out of tokens. I was told no so often the word lost meaning. Most replies never even arrived. In between, I drifted through Rome. I watched the sun scatter gold across crumbling brick. the city's promise felt inches away. Always outside my reach, my family, when we met, addressed me with forced politeness. My parents cut to the chase. "When will you admit you were wrong? You can start at the factory next week." They still saved a bed for me. Rosalia tried not to look guilty when she told me about high school. Nona simply shook her head every time we crossed paths. I tasted my rage like vinegar. It never faded. I learned to tuck it away beneath calm replies. You can't shout at reality. Sometimes, late when my belly burned with hunger and my coat reeked of old flour, I'd imagine sitting again in that community hall, holding up the truth, daring the cynics to look me in the eye. That fantasy kept my head above water. Eventually, I got a break. A local tabloid needed a free stringer for neighborhood crime. Most of my first assignments were just vacationing Americans lost in Trastevere, or a brawl outside a cheap bar. My stories weren't glamorous. Still, the published byline felt like armor, proof that I was not insane. With each article, I grew bolder. Then one night, on a crowded tram in Testaccio, I overheard two men whispering about a new construction project. The city council had pushed for it, a revitalized housing development. But something about their tone stuck with me, their furtive glances at a folder between them. I followed them off the tram and snapped a blurry photo. That image would become the seed for my first real investigation. Piece by piece, I tracked bribes, fake records, and phantom workers siphoning money from the project. It took months, but I learned to request records, push politely past indifference, and ask questions that squirmed past defenses. I sold the first half of the story to a small paper. The second sparked outrage at City Hall. Some minor officials lost their jobs. For a moment, my name meant something. But still, back home, no one said a word. My family avoided the topic. When they mentioned me to neighbors, they spoke of my difficulties, not my work. That ignoring, I realized, could last forever. So I worked harder. Drove to Naples and Genoa to chase courtroom leads, slept in bus terminals, built a network of informants, half of whom called me Pazzo behind my back. I endured, because behind my polite smile, rage and restraint moved in a tight, vital spiral. I would not be diminished. I would not back down. And at last, that drive bore fruit. The story that changed everything started with a slip. A hospital janitor's casual mention of favors to local doctors. I followed rumors from the outskirts of Rome, through hospitals whose walls reeked of Lysol and despair. Ugly truths emerged, an underground network selling appointments and medicines meant for the dying. A child had lost his life for lack of medication. I didn't sleep for weeks. Interviews, phone threats, running after shadowy leads, endless nights of scribbling in cramped apartments. My hands shook from coffee and fear and hunger. But the story would not let me go. A larger paper bought my work, then another. The fallout was swift. Arrests, breaking news, the byline, Luca Grandi. My email lit up. Editors wanted more. A regional Italian news channel sent a camera crew to film me beside the old hospital. National papers ran my name. I drank cold espresso, as old classmates called, pretending they'd always believed in me. But the voice that echoed loudest was still my mother's. It isn't work, it isn't steady, it isn't family. Her doubt, the scorn in the church hall, those smirks, they overshadowed the accolades. Yet there is one thing pain teaches you. It's that public vindication matters less than the moment your own people must face the facts. When their story, about you, dies in their throat. I decided I would return. It had been almost 7 years. The news arrived in the neighborhood well ahead of me. Rome is that sort of city. I called ahead. Padre Giovanni was still alive, still ran monthly meetings in the same church hall, though his voice cracked now in sermons. My mother asked if I'd join for dinner. her tone oddly formal, as if testing the water with her foot. The night I stepped back through the gates, nothing had changed, and everything had. I dressed simply, stubble trimmed, shoes shined, because pride was a private thing. The same avenue of cypress trees guided my walk. The church bell chimed as I passed beneath it. The hall, when I entered, was heavy with expectation. Chairs were set in neat rows. A projector flickered. The city's news had come here fast. Patients saved, officials in handcuffs. My story read aloud by the anchorman. My uncle cupped his chin with gnarled fingers, furtively inspecting me. Giuseppe now wore wire-frame glasses, studiously fixing the flickering screen. Nonna, shrunken but sharp-eyed as ever, gripped her rosary. My father stood at the back, pretending to straighten hymnals. Padre Giovanni announced in his wavering way, "We invite Luca Grandi to address the community." I stepped forward, heart in my mouth. Rage and restraint, old twin impulses, battled under my ribs. I looked at each face, not with the old defiance, but with the certainty that the truth was now a thing outside my own mouth, a fact that would drown their denial. The lights dimmed for the projector. Suddenly I was looking at myself, blurred, coat flapping in the wind, holding up the folder of evidence to the camera. My voice on the recording was clear. This network of corruption has cost lives. The people of Rome deserve better. The sound of clapping from television speakers, the clip of the mayor's speech promising reform, the newspaper headlines scrolling by, local journalist exposes scandal, Luca Grandi's investigation changes hospital policy. The silence in the hall outlived the film. I filled it, quietly but firmly. I was called foolish, a dreamer, I said. My voice was steadier than I felt. I left this community in anger, but also in hope. I believed a single person